Welcome to Among the Lilies. This is a show for ladies who are tired of pretending and are ready to be real. Today, I am so excited to talk to my good friend, Stephanie. You guys know her as Stephanie Gray, but now she's Stephanie Gray Connors, right? Connors, is that right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. I want to make sure I get your last name right. Stephanie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's great to be among the lilies. I have to say that when my husband and I were choosing names for our baby, I said to him one day, well, I think it could be twins. It wasn't. And I said, if it's twin girls, I would love Violet and Lily. And he
That would be
said,
so fun.
I know. And he's like, well, my grandma's name was Violet. And so that's why we have a little Violet.
Violet's really sweet too. I love it. I love it. And she's so gorgeous. I love your pictures with her little ukulele beside her. She is so
Yes.
precious.
It's a great size reference. She keeps outgrowing it. So
Eventually, she'll just be holding it, playing it. You're like, yep, she's gotten really big for these
yeah,
photos.
that's my plan because it's, every month. And then when we get to 12 months, my plan is instead of laying her down, is to have her sitting up holding the ukulele. So we'll see.
I love it. I love it. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for our listeners? I think a lot of them already know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a pro life speaker and author. Before getting married, I spent 20 years traveling the world speaking on the life issues, primarily pertaining to preborn children, but also for those who are suffering at the end of life as well. And in fact, that's how I first met you. I was thinking back, I believe it was 2003 or maybe 2001. It was your net year. So was that
Yeah,
03?
so I think it was 2001 because I did
Okay.
2000, 2001, and then 2001, 2002. Yeah,
Okay.
and
So
you
it was
spoke at
01.
training, right?
Well, I spoke in Kamloops when you
Oh,
were on a
yeah. So that
team.
was 2000, 2001 or 2002. You're right. You spoke in Kamloops first, right? And then you
Yes,
came to
and I was
training after.
I was just at the start of my pro-life career and I went to speak in Kamloops and the people bringing me in said, there's this group of young people with the group net. We want you to talk to them. And I remember you saying to me at the time that you were discerning joining the Sisters of Life, which was this
Yeah.
new order of pro-life nuns. And then a couple years later, I went to train the net missionaries at the net training camp. And you were married at that point with Matt and you had Liam, maybe
Yep.
Avila, I'm not
I
sure.
think, I think it was just Liam that year, but yeah.
So I was just recalling, how the beautiful thing about being in the pro-life movement and traveling is you get to meet so many amazing people and forge friendships around the world. And then I was recalling a time my job also took me to Catholic Answers to be on their radio show. And then I spent the night with you and Matt. And yeah, so good times, good memories.
I know, such great memories. But yeah, that is crazy. I forgot about that first time in Kamloops. But yeah, we met before I ever met Matt, which is crazy. And you're right,
Yes.
I did discern. And like back then, Sisters of Life was a new order. Isn't that so funny?
Yeah, it's
And
wild because now they're massive and amazing. And yeah.
I know. And they're just like everywhere. And there's so many people. And I think it's a common thing for people to discern with them, where I feel like back then we were like the fringe minority that knew who they were.
Right. It's so true. Yes, this order of nuns from New York. News about
Mm.
them made their way to Canada.
Yes, yes, exactly. And then I remember the first time you spoke at net training, just everyone, like everybody for the most part, the vast majority were already pro-life. And like over half were like very passionate pro-life, but I don't think they knew how to articulate. You were just so, so, so good. Like I think that at the time, but I still think now, like you were one of the best apologists for speaking out on life issues. Like you were just so articulate and good and just taking it back to a simple, like give us like your your whole, I don't know, just for our listeners that aren't familiar with you, aren't familiar with what you do, give us your basic argument for
Sure.
like what is the unborn.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So my big passion is helping people explain why they believe what they believe. It's not enough. It's necessary but not sufficient to say, I'm pro-life or whatever other views you hold. But you also need to know how to defend that and how to win others to that perspective if you're holding something that's true and good and just and so forth. So the pro-life view in a nutshell is I'll say to people, okay, do you believe in human rights? If yes, who gets human rights? And the obvious answer is humans. At which point I would say, okay, when do human beings begin their lives? And science teaches us that human beings begin their lives at fertilization, at sperm egg fusion. And so, since we know life begins then, and since we know human beings reproduce after their own kind, so dogs will produce dogs, cats produce cats, humans produce humans, that at fertilization of human parents, we have offspring that has to be human as well. And that offspring, because the embryo is growing, must be living. And so, if we believe in human rights, then what we know to be a living human being beginning at the moment of fertilization should have the same human rights as you and me. And the most foundational of all human rights is the right to life. So, the right to life that you and I have is the right to life that preborn children have too. So, that's kind of that in a nutshell, but there's so much more that can be unpacked.
There's so much more, but I love that you have it in a nutshell, because I think so often we're like, well, it's wrong to like kill babies. And it's like, okay, well now if we've just got another person that we're talking to, like all up in arms and all angry. And it's like, we like finding that common ground and like, I love how simple you make it. And it really is that simple. Like, I think we make it really, really complicated. And we're like, well, I have to prove at this time in the womb or that time. And you're just so good at keeping it so simple.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think, there's an important point to be made, which is that some things are simple and some things are complicated. When it comes to the abortion debate, the emotions involved, the social, psychological situations someone could be in can be very complex, very complicated. But the morality of the act of abortion itself, whether it's a right or wrong response to these very emotional, psychological, relational, complex situations, that is simple. And that comes down to determining if preborn children have a right to life.
Yeah. And I think by doing that, you have so much more weight. Like, I think that you're not like anyone and everyone can hear you, and you're just, I don't know, very, very good. And you've had a lot of, I think a lot of people respect you and what you do in the pro-life work. And I think that's probably what you're known for most. But I also, I'm going to interview someone else to hear like their whole story, but you also are a later vocation. Do you want to share with us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. So, I have journals to Jesus since my 20s where I'm like, dear Lord, please bring me a husband. And you can recall I had conversations with you over the years about that as well, and praying for a husband and going on so many different dates and hoping to find my husband. And, my 20s passed and my 30s almost passed. And I'm like, Lord, where is my husband? And so I got to this point where, as badly as I wanted to be married, I said to God, okay, I'm going to put down roots. I'm from Vancouver area in British Columbia, Canada. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy a condo near my family, and I'm just going to make my life as it is. And I hope you'll bring me a husband, but I'm going to hope that he comes right here. And so in the fall of 2019, I bought a condo. And January of 2020, I got possession of my condo. And at the end of that month, my spiritual director was visiting to bless my condo. And I started opening my heart to him, as I always did. And I started sobbing. And I was like, Father, I have this beautiful home and I have no one to share it with. And I was devastated. He didn't even leave when he was supposed to leave. I was so upset. So he was like praying over me. He's Byzantine. He's a Byzantine monk. And so he's got all his, crosses and holy oils and water and everything, praying over me and blessing me. And I found out later, but my now husband, at that exact same moment, I popped into his head across the continent in Florida. As he's flossing his teeth, getting ready for bed, he thought to himself, I wonder if that Stephanie Gray girl is still single. And the brief story there is, in 2016, there was an attempt to set us up, and we never met. We only emailed, and nothing came out of it. So fast forward 4 years, we've had no contact. I pop into his head at the exact moment I'm sobbing to my spiritual director. And we know it was the exact moment because he grabbed out his phone and he texted our mutual friend, Lila, and said, hey, is your friend Stephanie still single? So it took a couple days, but she contacted me and said, hey, that Joe guy wants to reconnect with you. So long story short, he reached out to me in February, and we met in March, right as the world was entering into the COVID insanity. And we had the time of our lives. I was in the US on a work trip. So we had an amazing weekend. And I knew that weekend, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the man I'm supposed to marry. So I flew back to Canada. The world's closing down. Borders are closing. And long story short, we Skyped for almost 40 days. and kept our cameras on almost the whole time to like do meals together and do our work and everything over that time. And then I had some work events in the US. I was able to get into the US. He couldn't get into Canada. So I returned to the US, and he proposed in May, and we got married in August.
I love it. I love it. I love that we've always done so many, and you've done so many 40 days for life. And Jesus is like, I'm going to give you your own little 40 days of Skype with your future husband.
And 40 years, because I turned 40. I turned 40 in 2020, in July of 2020, and we got married 3 weeks after I turned 40.
Oh my goodness. Look at that.
It's very biblical.
It's very biblical. Jesus is so good. He is so good. And I know that you guys struggled with fertility in the beginning, obviously just, I guess, age too, right? But do you want to share a little bit of the journey there?
Sure. Yeah. So for us, it wasn't so much infertility as it was losing a child that we very quickly conceived. So we were very blessed at my age. So I was 40, my husband was 45. So we're like, of course, we want to have kids right away, but will that happen to us? We don't know.
Right.
We're older. And so my second cycle, I was so blessed to conceive a little baby we named Lele, Latifi Cat. And we just delighted in her. I was pregnant with her when I did my big debate on your husband Matt's show, when I debated Dr. Malcolm Potts. I was still pregnant with her a week later when I debated Peter Singer. And I really feel like that little one was in my life for that purpose, that she was a profound witness, because it was in both of those
that was
debates.
so powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, both those debates. In the debate, neither of my opponents knew, I suddenly announced, I'm no longer a mother-to-be. My whole life I've been a mother-to-be, which means I've never been pregnant, but now I'm a mother because I am pregnant. And then it's like mic drop. And like, even my debate opponents, to give them credit, they're like, wow, congratulations. That's such wonderful news. And then very sadly, I started miscarrying a week after that second debate. And praise God, though, I had been consulted through my pro-life work for so many years by people who had miscarriages as to what they should do if they were in the process of it, what they should do if they're miscarrying, that I had thought through what I would do as a result of giving other people advice. And so my husband and I intentionally collected as much blood as we could. We kept all my pads. We didn't want to dispose of anything until we had a sense of whether we could see any baby, or whether we would just bury all of the blood. And then I passed a very discernible gestational sac that the baby would have been in. So we had a funeral. Lele is buried in our backyard, and we talk about her. Then we got pregnant again. So we talk about her to Violet, and Violet's still very little, but she wears a sleeper that says little sister because she knows she has a big sister in heaven. So so that's definitely something that I wouldn't want anyone to experience. Miscarriage is devastating, and I certainly pray I don't have to live through that again. But I am grateful that I'm a mother to a baby in heaven and a baby on earth.
Yeah, it's one of those clubs you don't want to be a part of, but having walked other people through it or going through it yourself, I feel like that's the only way you're able to help and minister other women that are going through it. And that's kind of beautiful that you had already helped other people through it. So when you were experiencing it yourself, I was shocked. I had friends that had miscarried, but I didn't realize, and it depends how far along you are and stuff. But my first miscarriage was really, really, really rough. And just knowing, but having that, I know it's a baby, I think is, it's hard, but there's also something so good and tangible. Like, as you were saying, like your daughter has an older sister in heaven, like having that concrete knowledge, I think is so good. Cause I think for maybe our secular friends that go through miscarriage, like it is, you mourn and it's so hard. And then to be like, oh, but it's not a baby. Like,
right. Then why would you mourn? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just going through that. And I remember your debates too. And I loved when they congratulated you. And it was like, okay, I feel like right there, it was like, and you lost the debate. Like, thank you for congratulating her. Cause it's true. And they knew that they wanted you to have this baby, but it was like, well, because you want the baby, I'm congratulating you, but I wouldn't congratulate a woman that doesn't want the baby. And it's like, but it's the same. Right. And I love that her short time here on earth is still blessing people. Like people are still
Mhm.
watching. Like I don't even know how many views Matt's had on that debate. It's crazy.
Right.
So many. And she's just such a witness. And she's like her mom,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
little pro-life witness. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
tell us,
she really is. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, you go.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, even after the fact, I've had a few people contact me who saw only that debate and haven't followed me since and said, "Oh, I heard you were pregnant on the debate, so congratulations, your baby must be born by now." So now it's another opportunity to evangelize on this topic of miscarriage insofar as acknowledging, look, I'm not gonna hide that I lost a baby. So I reply to these people and I say, actually, I was pregnant, I miscarried that baby, but this is her name, this is the blog I wrote about her, this is what my husband and I did. And so it's an opportunity to spread the word of acknowledging that this little life existed and what you can do when you lose a life like that, so that if someone I'm communicating with finds themselves, God forbid, in that experience in the future, they maybe know what to do better because I witnessed to them in being very open.
Yes. Yeah. One of my first friends or whatever, I always, a friend of mine, Maria Walther, was my first really close friend that I think lost a baby. And then it was a little more public. Like I had friends that lost babies early on, but this one, she was in her third trimester. And we ended up having a funeral for the baby, but I was very close friends, and we were just praying the whole time. We got the news right away that she was miscarrying, and that she had like a day at home still with her baby in her womb, knowing that the baby had already died. And just that time, her and her husband praying, and him saying like, okay, Lord, this changes nothing between you and me. This household will still serve you. We still love you. Like, help us through this. And I remember at the funeral, she had a tiny little coffin, and the church was completely packed, like so packed. And I remember at one point they were singing the song "Blessed Be the Name of the Lord." And my friend Ben had his arm around his wife, and she had one hand on they had a daughter at the time, holding the daughter, and his other hand, he was just extending up, and he was saying, "Blessed be the name of the Lord. You give and take away, but I will still choose to say, blessed be your name." And I, like years later, I think I had my miscarriage, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, I still recalled that image, and I still recalled that coffin and everyone in that church praying. And when we were leaving, it was just such a beautiful witness of life. And I remember my secretary at the time was also really involved in the pro-life work, and she said, "Cameron, I guaranteed there's women here that have been healed from their abortions, from being here right now. Like, this is giving them closure, and this is them healing and saying goodbye to that baby that they lost. And she said the same thing about miscarriages, and she's like, this baby. And so they named the baby Mariah Faith, and they talk about that's the mountain that Abraham took his son up to
Yes.
sacrifice. And I just thought, and they had that name picked out ahead of time, but I love that it was like, okay, I'm going to trust you, Lord. Like, okay, I will sacrifice my son if this is what you're asking. And we don't know the effects that it has, the ripple effects. And I think it's so beautiful that you actually can see some of the ripple effects of her life,
Mhm.
and how many
Yes.
people she's ministered to in just
Right.
such a short time.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's the power of witness is not to be minimized. It's very significant, and sometimes we get to see the impact it has on others, and other times we, on this side of heaven, don't get to hear the impact. But nonetheless, it can really free people, give them permission to grieve. Yeah, with miscarriage, often, although sometimes that's swept under the rug, there can be a real openness and acknowledgement of loss. Whereas with abortion, it's stuff it down, it wasn't a
Yeah.
baby, you didn't lose anything. And so when we're open about losing the grief that comes with losing children through miscarriage, then it gives permission to people who have intentionally ended their children's lives to acknowledge,
Yes.
whoa, I have something to grieve. I have someone to grieve. There is loss that has happened here. And so, yeah, it can be healing on a number of levels when we talk about our testimonies.
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard even people who have had trauma like throughout their life, but like through prayer going back to like childhood trauma, and like almost someone was telling me about like they, like, it was through a prayer type experience, knew that their mom had like obviously didn't choose abortion, but had thought about having an abortion and like the trauma that that had on the baby in the womb, you know? And so like later was able to confirm it with their mom that that happened. And just like, yeah, we don't know, you know? And as we peel back these layers, both for the mom and the child, but they're, and the husband, I remember there's a CFR that gave a talk who, he, his girlfriend in high school became pregnant and he wanted her to keep the baby and he begged her and it's like, let's go talk to my parents. Let's tell them. And she was like, no, not at all. Like, we're going to, like, this is not okay. Like, we got to take care of this. And she ended up telling her parents. So he told his parents and his parents were very pro-life and like, okay, we're going to support you guys. You're going to get a job. You're going to provide for this girl and the baby and all this stuff. And they were like, no, 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 we're getting rid of this. Like, we're going to make this all go away. And so the other parents forced her to have an abortion. But I think that's also what she thought she wanted because she thought they could go back to normal. And he talked about how they never went back to normal. They broke up. And he said, like, there's this hole in his heart. And he's like, I wish I could have done more. Like, I wish I would have fought her more on it. But it was just the brokenness and like wanting it to just disappear. And that just doesn't happen, right?
Right.
But this witness, now he as a friar, like goes around and talks about it and it's like, yeah, we make mistakes and this is one of mine. And this baby, he tells people about, right? And yeah, and that baby's life was ended, which is so sad, but was not wasted. And the effects of that. And yeah, and I think it's so important for us to fight for that, but then also to help find the healing. But yeah, we don't know. We don't know what happens. Yeah, it's interesting now with social media and just the way things are. Because like if you were giving a talk, if that debate was like a live thing, it would only have been those people that watched it, and it would only been that moment. Where now with like recordings, it's like there's so many people still watching it. Like people are watching us right now, and they'll go watch that talk. And you know, your baby's a witness still, you know, and it's just ongoing, and you can kind of see it, which is that's really neat.
Yeah, it is. And even like when people will say to me, with Violet, say, oh, is this your first? And I always reply, oh, actually, our first one is in heaven and she came right after. And then the reaction you get from people is really fascinating. Some will immediately say, oh, I'm so sorry. Others will say, oh, I actually lost a baby too. And suddenly they're now sharing and acknowledging something that maybe they don't often acknowledge. So yeah, legacies certainly live on, but social media and technology certainly has the advantage of carrying a message into the future beyond just the present moment. And so to know, even my talk at Google that I gave back in 2017, I mean, still every year there's tens of thousands of new views of people who watch that, you know, several 5-year-old talk at this point. Through the power of technology. So it's about harnessing all of these things for good and drawing good out of any situation or circumstance we're in.
Yeah. And then can you talk a little more about your time with Violet? Didn't you also need to get on progesterone? Did you need support through your pregnancy with her?
Yes. So this is also just a very interesting part of our story. So we had got pregnant with Violet right after the miscarriage. And I had several friends who all don't know each other. They were different circles of friends, about 5 at different times would all approach me when I first announced I was pregnant again and say, have you had your progesterone checked? You should get your progesterone checked. That can lead to miscarriage. And I always kind of dismissed it and said, oh, no. Like I've been tracking my cycle for years and my doctor didn't think progesterone was the reason for the miscarriage with Lele. So I don't think I need to check. But when about the 5th friend brought up progesterone to me, I was like, okay, maybe I need to look into this. So I called my doctor and I said, look, can you run some blood work on, just check my progesterone? And so they said, well, we don't normally do that if everything seems fine, but sure, if you want, we can. And so they ran the numbers and they were fine. And I was just a little more persistent. And I said, okay, that's great. They're fine, but can you check me in a week? I just want to make sure they continue to be fine. So like, well, we really don't do this, but okay. So a week later, they put in an order for blood work and they were dropping. And a week later, they should not have been dropping. So I immediately freaked out. And my same dear friend, Lila, who connected my husband and I, I texted her and I was like, "Oh my gosh, do you know any of these NAPRO doctors?" Because I was new to Florida and wasn't
Right.
connected to an NAPRO doc, and my doctor wasn't a specialist in that. And so I said, "Look, my progesterone's dropping. I need a physician who's trained in this type of restorative reproductive medicine." So immediately, like within an hour, she had contacted this amazing physician who you might have known when you were in San Diego, Dr. George Delgado.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
he is
He was my
he's
doctor.
wonderful. Oh, awesome. He's so
Yeah.
wonderful. So literally within an hour, he said to Lila, yes, she can contact me. I contact him, explain the situation. He gave me a 3-day progesterone prescription to tide me over for the next 3 days till I could find a physician locally who I found like 30 minutes away from my home, who's an amazing doctor. And so he monitored my pregnancy, and I actually had to take progesterone supplements until the 23rd week of pregnancy. Otherwise, I could have miscarried Violet as well. And by 23 weeks, my body had stabilized with the hormones, and it wasn't needed any further. But and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but in my new book, which is about infertility and fertility and all of that, I share my story and I talk about how a lot of people don't realize something as simple as checking your hormone levels can impact whether a pregnancy is able to be maintained or not. And I'm so grateful that this knowledge came to me and I was able to act on it. And I want other people to know so that they don't lose a child or have a difficult time getting pregnant just because their hormones could use a little supplementation.
Yeah, and something that simple too, that it's like, okay, this isn't massive intervention. This is like minimum intervention. I mean, it's
Right.
not fun. Like I've had friends that I've had to give them their progesterone shot every day, you know? But it's like, yeah, like let's do what we need to. Um, and yeah, and just knowing, like I think about even with me, I was diagnosed before I ever met Matt, before I got married with stage 4 endometriosis.
Ooh.
And it was only because I dated a guy whose mom taught Creighton NFP. And he mentioned it to me and he's like, do you know you're always sick when you're on your period and when you're ovulating? And I was so offended. I was like, excuse you? I'm like, how do you even know that? Because I wasn't familiar with my body. I didn't know when I ovulated. So I was offended that this boyfriend of mine, who we had a chaste relationship, like, how the heck does he know when I'm ovulating, you know? But he was just like, no, it makes sense because, like, you're really sick here and you're really sick here. And he's like, I think you should talk to my mom. And I talked to her and she taught me how to chart. And she's like, I have a doctor that you should go see. And he was just like, your textbook endometriosis. Has no one ever talked about doing a laparoscopy? And I'm like, no. Like people say I have a low pain tolerance, which is ridiculous because I have a high pain tolerance. And he's like, yeah, no, that would make sense. And went in, did the surgery, and yeah, stage 4, it was like everywhere. And so if I had not had that connection or that exposure, like I don't think Matt and I could have had kids at all. And I
Right.
had another surgery right before, like after we got married, I could tell that it was coming back, and we had surgery and tried. Like our kids are a gift because of NFP, you know, because of, well, Creighton in particular, but because of NAPRO technology, we knew how to get pregnant and we knew when to try to get pregnant. And yeah, supporting that pregnancy is massive.
It's huge. And to think like what a blessing it is that you've had the children you have. And a lot of people would never have that blessing because they aren't connected to the right doctors and the right resources. And so that's one of the things that I include in my book is I tell those stories of other people, not just my own experience, who have had things like I actually tell a story of a friend who has stage 4 endometriosis. And she is, you know, in the time I wrote the book, she was waiting for surgery. She actually just got her surgery, but is now hoping to conceive as a result of getting surgery. Or I know someone who had an ovarian wedge resection who has PCOS. And once
Wow.
they did that, they got pregnant within a year and they now have 3 children. And so when you tell these stories, it shows people, okay, wait, if I identify what's going wrong in my body and I
Yes.
address the underlying issue and take pharmaceuticals or have surgeries that correct the pathology within my body, it's not a guarantee, but it's a greater likelihood that I will be able to conceive and maintain a pregnancy. And you're a living testimony of that, as am I. So
Yeah. Yeah. The doctor who actually, so you know my story, but I don't know that all my listeners do. But so after my So my fourth child that I had almost died. Like
That was Peter, right?
yeah, that was Peter.
I remember
Yeah.
praying for Peter. Yes, at
Yep.
the time. Yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't quite make it to term with him. I was always very sick in pregnancy, but I couldn't quite make it to term. And then he survived, praise God, but he was a really sick baby. And then the baby after him, baby Micah, no, it was Gideon next. So it was Gideon. No, it was Micah first. So Micah, I almost died with, and he did die. And so I think I was 14 weeks along, and I ended up, that's the one where I ended up going septic, and I ended up living in the hospital for like a month. I was in the ICU for like a week. And then I had another baby after that I lost. And unfortunately, because my body was just so sick, I had to have a hysterectomy. And the doctor that did my hysterectomy specialized in endometriosis. And he said that everything was basically, I was all scar tissue. So my uterus was like adhered to my C-section scar, which was adhered, all this stuff. But after he did it, he's like, I would be very surprised that you carried a baby to term. I don't know how you carried 3. He's like, I don't know how you have 4 living children. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, that shouldn't have happened, which is just such a gift. Like, it shows like God and his goodness, you know? I am so thankful. Like, I mourn my children that I don't have, that I will one day be united with in heaven. But like after he did the surgery, he basically said the 4 you have here, you shouldn't have been able to take to term. So I don't know if obviously it's God's grace. I don't know if it was just the right medical intervention. We had a doctor in Ireland that put me on naltrexone, and that helped a lot, you know, but I think knowing like, okay, let's think outside the box, because I think so often, and I'm so glad you've written a book on this, because I think so often people are like, well, if you can't get pregnant, then you need to go do IVF, because that is the only answer. Like, either you be normal or you have IVF. And it's like, who is normal anyhow, right?
Right. There, option C is
Right?
there's something called restorative reproductive medicine and Creighton and naprotechnology, and again, it's not a guarantee. And so that's why one of the things I include in my book are the stories of people who never did end up conceiving, and some chose to just be spiritual parents and really devote themselves to ministry, and others chose to adopt and foster. So I acknowledge, hey, this is a heavy cross in fertility that not everyone is going to have entirely lifted off of them. But there are some people for whom this cross can be taken off of them if they know about restorative reproductive medicine. And I'm just curious again, because we've already spoken about common physicians. I don't know who your doc in Ireland was, but by any chance, was it Dr. Phil Boyle?
It was, yeah.
Hilarious. So Phil, God bless him, he endorsed my book, and I love
did he?
his work. Yeah. So his clinic in Dublin is amazing, Neo Fertility, and they do incredible work to help couples conceive and maintain a pregnancy without replacing the sexual act. So they aid the sexual act by making sure the husband and wife's bodies are in optimal condition to achieve conception. And they correct things through surgery and through hormones and charting and so forth. But then they leave, quote unquote, nature to take its course, as opposed to IVF, which basically makes sex unnecessary. And that's one of the reasons why IVF is problematic, is it separates people as opposed to uniting them.
Yeah, I met him when I was pregnant with Liam in Dublin. We were there for like a retreat or conference, and I don't even know how we started talking, but yeah, I mentioned, you know, having endometriosis, and he's like, have you heard of low dose naltrexone? I was like, no. And he's like, I think you should be on it right after you have your baby. You know, it's safe enough to take a pregnancy. We just started chatting. And so I had like a long distance relationship, because I lived like 5 hours from Dublin. And this was like a really long time ago. It was like 14 years ago. So
I can't believe you have a teenager.
I know. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. And Aval is 12. So Aval is almost 13. I'm like, I can't believe. Does she need you? You can bring her in.
So Violet's going to come. We actually are. Oh, love, you can bring her in.
We're happy to see Violet. Bring her in.
I'm live.
But that's okay. It doesn't matter.
You can pass her to me.
Among the Lilies is very open to babies being on the show.
My little baby. Oh, she just. Here, how about you? You're sweet pea. I'll just.
And then I also apologize. I keep looking this way, so I put my phone down here, but it's like delayed. So for me to see Stephanie, I need to turn this way and look at my screen.
Someone Someone wants to be live on YouTube.
Hello, aren't you beautiful? Oh, I should wave this way so you can see me, but I want to see you, so I'm looking that way.
I guess I should get
Hello.
background. So this is Miss Violet, and she was just getting her sleeper on, so you can see her undershirt. Yes, rainbow is my favorite color.
Oh,
Violet
I
is my
love
favorite
it.
color.
Violet, you are
Yeah.
so precious. You are so beautiful. You are. We have a friend in Canada who has a farm and she has animals and she just had a cow and Christine Malone's little girl wanted to name. So Jen's like, what should we name the cow? It's this tiny little cow. And she wanted to name it Rainbow Black. She's 3 years old. This little 3-year-old's like, I think the name should be Rainbow Black because it's a black cow.
Violet laughed at the exact moment you said that, even though she can't hear what you're saying because I have earphones in. Well done, sweet pea. Well done.
You knew. It was another Canadian who had a great idea. You're half Canadian, right?
Although,
Sweet girl.
well, you know that this is the funny thing. So technically, we can apply for Canadian citizenship. I mean, she was born in the U.S., so she's currently an American. But I've been watching all the craziness going on in Canada and this impending move towards communism. And I've thought, I don't know if I want my daughter to have Canadian citizenship. I am so frustrated with people having this communist type mentality. But then there have been people that have been very pro freedom and taking great personal risk. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should be proud to be a Canadian for those people standing up for goodness and truth and justice. So.
Right? No, I just did an episode yesterday talking about it. And I feel like I've been following, and I'm sure you're the same, been following the Freedom Convoy from before other people heard of it. So I feel like just now Americans are starting to hear of it, but like we heard of it from the beginning because you're Canadian and I have so many Canadian friends and living in Ottawa, you know, everybody, I have friends that like their kids have colored signs and brought out water bottles and packed lunches to deliver to all the truckers. And yeah, I'm sure your family and friends have been the same, huh?
Yeah. My family's been out protesting, in British Columbia, but there's protests across the country to say, look, we need to allow freedom and get rid of discrimination because it's just so tragic what's happening. People losing their jobs and their livelihoods and not being able to go places just because they choose not to get an experimental vaccine. Some do, some don't. But this forcing of people to get that is the problem, and the mandates are the problem. So
yeah, there's actually been a lot of Americans that have gone up, and so what I find funny is I'm like, these truckers are going up, which is great. I love that Americans are like, we want to support you in this, but for them to cross the border, they have to be vaccinated. So it's like this isn't about the vaccine. This is about unjust mandates.
Yes,
and you're in the free state of Florida, so I mean, you've had freedom for so long, right? Where so much, and I think British Columbia, I don't think they're as bad as Ontario. Am I right in thinking that BC is not quite as bad?
It is bad in BC, but you're right. Ontario is even worse. It's definitely very oppressive there. And it's interesting you should point out being in the free state of Florida, because I almost have felt like, you know, survivor guilt when someone survives a crash and other people die and they're like, why me? And what does this survival mean for the life that I still have? And I've kind of felt that way where I have thought, I am living in total freedom. Like life is so normal here. And I say this as someone who had COVID in my last week of pregnancy. I was diagnosed COVID positive because I had a fever. And of course, as you know, when you're pregnant, if you have a fever, that's bad news.
Right.
But the blessing of being in this state, in this country, is I was able to get medical intervention right away. And there are medicines, like I took hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. And there are people who can't get that in Canada. Like doctors are literally being told you cannot prescribe that. So, you know, I say this as someone who lived through COVID, gave birth with COVID. And so I'm like, why do I have access to this? And why am I in freedom? And I watch my family and friends back home face such difficulties. So I do my best to raise my voice online. And but yeah, it's two very different worlds right now.
Yeah, it's crazy because someone wrote a comment like saying that I was like as if America can judge Canada. I'm like, I'm not judging them. I'm just pointing out the facts. And but that it's exactly that. I'm like, well, I'm only talking to all my friends that are up there, and I have friends in like the Vogels are in BC, so I kind of have that experience. And then most of my other friends are in Ontario, but then they tell me about what's going on in Quebec, and I'm just like, this is crazy. And then there's a couple people in Saskatchewan, Alberta, so I feel like we have the whole gamut, like just on our little Marco Polo group. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
not judging Canada at all, but I'm saying like, this is not okay. Like, I've lived in Canada for multiple years. I love Canadians. And what I love is like, Canadians are so polite. So I'm sorry, but to push a Canadian to the point where it's like, we've got to stand up and do something. Like, we need to. So I love that you guys, like the Canadians made a bigger protest and a bigger trucker convoy than we've done here, because I think ours is so state by state. So we're like, forget it. We're going to another state and we just leave. Right.
That's true. That is what people are doing. Like we've had a huge influx of population here in Florida, same in Texas, Idaho.
Yeah.
I think a lot of California people are moving to Idaho. So, but yeah, you don't have the same flexibility in Canada. I mean, there are some provinces that are more free than others, but it's not the same. So yeah, you've got this kind of countrywide movement now happening, which is huge. So God bless them.
Yeah. Yeah. God bless them is right. Yeah. I'm praying for everything to stay peaceful and stay good. And I've seen multiple things where like someone did vandalize something, but then someone else comes behind and like cleans it up. And it's like, we need to be kind to business owners. And they're like Windexing and getting off graffiti. I'm like, that is awesome. Like, I love that it's like, well, whoever did this was not kind, but I'm going to clean it for you, shop owner. Don't worry. And just
Yes,
the beauty of
I
like
love
respecting
that.
all humans. Yeah.
I love that. And it reminds me of actually my pro-life activism days where we would, take pro-life signs to the streets and go on tours and
Yeah.
protest. And I remember we were always peaceful and we had a code of conduct that was very strict and our team was always well trained. But then there would be people that would try to create problems that didn't share our view against abortion, but wanted to make it look like we were the ones
Right.
causing some type of vandalism or whatever, and it wasn't us. And so that's what I find very frustrating right now is I know the truckers at a leadership level have a code of conduct where like, look, we are peaceful, we are not committing acts of violence. So when these acts of violence occur, it is not the freedom convoy, but some people are misrepresenting that it is. And so that becomes so frustrating. I remember one of my former colleagues saying to me, a lie is halfway around the world before the truth gets a chance to put its boots on.
Yes. Yeah, that is so
happening.
true. Yeah. And taking that peaceful mindset and not getting angry by it. It's like, okay, we're going to rise above. We're going to be better than this. And yeah, when is your book coming out? I know you made reference to it.
Yeah, so my book actually just came out. So it's hot off the press. This is it here, Conceived by Science. Whoopsie. And then the subtitle is Thinking Carefully and Compassionately About Infertility and IVF. So it really is my style with all pro-life apologetics. It's head and the heart. So I talk about arguments and I talk about what to say from a logic perspective, but I also share the heart. And I share a lot of stories of people who faced infertility and what they've done to try to resolve that. So I hope people check it out. It's on Amazon as well as my website. and Violet is grabbing
Violet, you want to be the focus. She's like, I am the star of the show. Violet, we agree. You are beautiful and you are the star of the show. Hello. Hello, Violet. You're so gorgeous. Yes. Okay, so they can find it on Amazon. Where else can they find it? So
my website. So my website is loveunleasheslife.com. So people can go there as well as check out the book Conceived by Science on Amazon.
Okay, Love Unleashes Life. Okay, loveunleasheslife.com. Perfect.
And kind of like her, Love Unleashed Life and Love Unleashes Life.
Exactly. And sometimes it's that beautiful. Other times it's not. But you are ridiculously beautiful. You really are.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel bad that I'm like I'm staring at the screen because that's where I see her. But hi, sweet girl. I should look this up.
Oh, now she's looking. Yeah. Although it's funny because when you do these things, you wonder to yourself, are babies looking at themselves or are they looking at the other people on the screen?
Either way, they see a face, and faces are fun. That's so great.
True. Faces are.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on. And I love just getting to chat with you and get caught up. And one of these days, I'm going to have my real studio set up and we'll have you come up and we'll do like super in person. But it's fun to at least do this Skype interview now. And yeah, I will send people, I'll put a link to your website below. Anything else you want to let our listeners know about that you have going on?
I think, yeah, that's the main one right now is I read a great book years ago. It's a business book called Essentialism: The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And one of the taglines the author has is less but better. So right now I'm trying to focus on less but better. So of course my main focus is this sweet little lamb here. But when I do work, I'm trying to focus on just a few things, do them really well. So right now my main focus is the book. So I would say, yeah, that's the most important thing I'd love people to check out is Conceived by Science at loveunleasheslife.com or Amazon, and share it with friends, because I really hope it doesn't just make an intellectual case against IVF, but that it really, Marla wants to say that she hopes, as I hope, that it really speaks to people who live with the cross of infertility and gives them hope that there are things that can be done.
Yeah, she wants their voices to be heard. We hear you, Violet.
Yes.
You want their voices to be heard. And I think it is something that we don't often, unless you know someone and you know them well, being willing to share that and share their story. And I think it's so great that you have so many stories out there. Deborah just wrote, "Thanks, Stephanie. I just purchased your book right now." So someone's already buying it. Cool. I mean, they're quick, right? They're in the comments. They're doing it. So thank you so much. Violet, thank you for letting us steal your mom. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. And and I really appreciate it. And I love all that you're doing, especially making a beautiful human and watching her grow. And I'm so happy for you. I feel like you were for so many of our single friends, you were like their hope. And they're like, okay, well, it's not that I'm doing anything wrong because Stephanie's still single and she's gorgeous and smart and funny. And it's like, okay, it's not just me. And it's like that, I don't know. I think there's certain people that are like, I don't know why. And I think it's the Lord's timing, right? Like, obviously, like your husband probably wasn't in the place to be ready to marry you. And now, like, it's just, you're so intentional and like, okay, let's do this. Let's get married. Let's make beautiful humans. And
Yeah. I mean, I have to say God's timing truly is incredible, because when you know, and when it's right, it's right. And I just felt the whole relationship, which was obviously very fast, that it's like that song, Waymaker. You're a waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. And I felt like the whole time God was just parting the waters, making a way. So yeah, for any woman who's still single and wanting to be married, I remember reading the articles of people who would be like, I'm 25 and still single, or I'm 30 and still single. And I'd be like, yeah, well, try being 35. So for anyone who's, 37, 38, 39, 40, I hope I can give you some hope that the dream is possible. So.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. All right. God bless.
God bless. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye. Bye-bye, Violet. Bye-bye. Oh, look here. I have lilies. Look, you want to see your friends?
Oh, yes. Lilies. They look nice with violets. Yes.
Oh, she likes those. You like those? All right. Have a good day. Enjoy your mommy. Bye-bye.
Bye.